This is where we can begin. Just after dawn, in a foreign country, on a flat shore by the North Sea, in what we now call the Netherlands. This is Friesland, and it's in this part of the world that we can still hear the modern language that we believe sounds closest to what the ancestor of English sounded like 1500 years ago.
En als we dan maart nog even bezoeken, maart hebben we toch wel een aantal dagen rond met frost. Ja, Friesen die het op zo'n 9 dagen, dat vooral ondergroen.
In Friesland, many people start their day listening to the weather forecast from popular weatherman Piet Palusma.
En dan man je, tiesje en waasje. Het worden dagen...
Some of his words might sound familiar, like 3 and 4, frost and freeze.
Een temperatuur zomer bij de 3 of de 4 graden, geen frost, het zal net vriezen.
Mist and blue.
Vierders de kans op mist. En dan morgen. En daarmee flink wat zinnen. Blauw in de lucht en zwart.
The reason we can recognize these words is that modern Frisian and modern English can both be traced back to the same family, the Germanic family of languages. And some words have stayed more or less the same down the centuries. Butter, bread, cheese, meal, sleep, boat, snow, sea, storm. The West Germanic tribes who invented these words were a warlike, adventurous people. They'd been on the move through Europe for the best part of 1,000 years and now had settlements in what we would call the lowlands of Northern Europe, Holland, Germany and Denmark. But they were still greedy for land, ready to move on. This is the island of Terschelling. The English coast is about 250 miles to the southwest behind me. It was from these islands and the low-lying Frisian mainland that in the 5th century a Germanic tribe, part of the family that also contained Jutes, Angles and Saxons, made sail to look for a better life. And they took their language, our language, with them.
Us mid flodabar, on ranrada chiak Stefan Acker, snilletje semiark, snude bewunden. Who had with this leeuwde land gezochten, ware berekena, zwaars wind voordraf.
The Germanic tribes weren't the first to invade our shores. More than 500 years before, the Romans had also come by sea to impose their will. Now their empire had crumbled, and they'd abandoned these islands, leaving the native tribes, the Britons or Celts, to their fate. This is Pevensey Castle, an ancient Roman fort that used to stand on the very shoreline of the south coast. The chronicle of the period reports that in the year 491, Germanic invaders laid siege and slaughtered the Celts who'd taken refuge here. Not one of them was left alive. Other Celts did survive the invasion, 1 million or more of them in England, but they were a broken people. The clue to their fate lies in the word the Germanic tribes used to describe them. It was Wilas, a name that lives on in our modern language as Welsh. 1,500 years ago, it meant both foreigner and slave. The Celts became servants and followers, second-class citizens. The only way up was to become part of the invaders' tribes, to adopt their culture and their language. The Celts and their language were pushed to the margins. Only a handful of words from the Celtic languages survive into modern English. In the north, where I come from, we have crag, meaning rock, coombe, meaning deep valley, and dialect words like brat and brock for badger. In the south, they left us the names of Thames and Avon, Dover and London. But these were fragments. The language that prevailed was that of the victors. By the end of the 6th century, these Germanic tribes occupied half of mainland Britain. They had divided into a number of kingdoms: Kent, Sussex, Essex and Wessex, denoting the settlements of southern, eastern and western Saxon tribes; East Anglia, named after the Angles who gave England its name; Mercia in the Midlands, Northumbria in the north. Throughout these areas, many modern place names come from that settlement, or use the words they brought. We live with them. We live in them. Every day. The ing in modern place names means the people of. Ton, as in Wickton where I come from, means enclosure or village. Ham means farm, which might surprise one or two Tottenham supporters. The Germanic tribes now settled around the country all spoke their own dialects. From among them would emerge one language, Anglo-Saxon or Old English, and we all speak it every day.
Without foreign strikers, none of them can really finish. Armstrong, Everson, Shearer.
We just need some youth and pace, really.
Examine the language you use today and you'll still find hundreds of words from a language over 1,500 years old. Keywords ranging from the names we give family members to numbers.
Gardner also. So what do you reckon today? I think we'll win 2-1 today, so I'll drink to that. I live in like a West Ham sort of area, and I've got a lot of West Ham friends, but for this game we'll be enemies.
For the home games, I would go with the guys we meet up from the Top Spurs website, or with my daughter to other games. I mean, she's 5 at the moment, loves it. She loves singing the songs, the nice ones anyway.
Most of those words were from Old English. Nouns like youth, son, daughter, field, friend, home and ground. Prepositions like in and on, into, by and from. And the are from Old English. All the numbers and verbs like drink, come and go, sing, like and love. But would these words have sounded different all those years ago? In a slightly quieter pub, I asked language expert Katie Lowe.
They sound a little different. I mean, the Old English for sun is sunu. That's not so very different. Game is garmen, ground is grund. I noticed that Steve says his daughter loves singing songs. If you said that in Old English, it would be his dochter loveth our sangers singen. And you can see that that sounds pretty much like modern English.
English took its first steps away from its tribal roots with the revival of Christianity.
Nu I schulen herian, he often reaches weird. Methodes mikte and his mood gethunk.
Let us praise the King of Heaven, the power of the Creator and his conception, the work of the glorious Father who created every wonder, the eternal Lord.
He often to profe, harlik schipend.
In 597, the monk and prior Augustine led a mission from Rome to Kent. Around the same time, Irish monks of the Celtic Church were establishing a presence in the north. Within a century, Christians built churches and monasteries. This is St. Paul's in Jarrow, parts of which date from the 7th century. Faith and stone weren't the only things the Christian missionaries brought to the country. They brought the international language of the Christian religion, Latin. Latin terms became part of the English word hoard. Altare became altar, apostolus became apostle, mass, monk and verse and many others all come from the Latin. This would become a pattern of English, the layering of words taken from different source languages. And from Latin too, the English took their script. The Angles, Saxons, Frisians and Jutes, who had become the English, hadn't brought script as we know it with them, but runes. The runic alphabet was made up of symbols formed mainly of straight lines, so that the letters could be carved into stone or wood. Those were their media, rather than parchment or paper. Though this is a short poem, most examples of runic writing that survive suggest runes were mainly used for short, practical messages or graffiti. The Latin alphabet was different. With its curves and bows, it allowed words to be easily written using pen and ink onto pages of parchment or vellum, which, gathered together into a book, could be widely circulated. Christianity brought the book to these shores. Verbum, the word. Soon a native culture of scholarship began to flower, a culture based on Latin and on writing. The magnificent Lindisfarne Gospels were created in the 8th century on the island of Lindisfarne, just off the northeast coast. A few miles south, at the monastery of St. Paul's in Jarrow, the great English monk and scholar Bede, born and educated in Northumbria, began writing the first ever history of the English-speaking people. He wrote, of course, in Latin, the language of scholarship. The prevailing language among the people was still Old English, but Latin, this powerful medium, was now amongst them. Now, Old English was written down, using the Latin alphabet, while retaining some of the old runes as letters. From the 7th century, we find English itself written on parchment in a language and a script which we can just about recognize as our own.
Father User thu arth in hiofnu, Siga halgard noma din, Tokumath richa din, Si willow din swa is in hiof.
With writing, Old English stole a march on other languages spoken in Europe at the time. Prayers were recorded and books of the Bible translated. The laws of the land were written down, and the language soon became capable of recording and expressing an increasingly wide and subtle range of human experience. And in the right hands, Old English was now powerful and supple enough to take you to imaginary worlds, fire the blood, be poetry.
What? We gardena in Yardawum, Theod Kuninga Thrumge Frunon.
So, the Spear Danes in days gone by, and the kings who ruled them, had courage and greatness. We have heard of those princes' heroic campaigns.
No one knows who composed the epic Beowulf sometime between the mid-7th and end of the 10th century. It's the first great poem in the English language, the beginning of a glorious tradition which will lead to Chaucer, Shakespeare and beyond. The poem celebrates the glory days of the Germanic tribes, epitomized in the heroic warrior who gives the poem its name. The power of the language can be heard in this passage, which introduces Beowulf's archenemy, the monster Grendel.
The comb of Mora, under Misleodum, Grendel Gongan, Goda's
in off the moors, down through the mist bands, God-cursed Grendel came greedily loping.
Muntese Manskaffa,
the bane of the race of men roamed forth, hunting for a prey in the high hall. Spurned and joyless, he journeyed on ahead and arrived at the bawn.
On bread the Biala Hudig, the Higa Borgan was.
Then his rage boiled over. He ripped open the mouth of the building, maddening for blood. He grabbed and mauled a man on his bench, bit into his bone lappings, bolted down his blood, and gorged on him in lumps, leaving the body utterly lifeless, eaten up hand and foot.
What does that tell us about English at that time, Seamus? What sort of language was it when you came to it? Do you think this is a fully developed poetic language?
It's certainly a fully developed poetic language. It's capable of great elaboration. But what struck me generally about Old English from the moment I read the bits of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle right through to Beowulf is it's terrific for telling what happened. It's a wonderful sense of the indicative mood all through it. It's terrific for action, terrific for description. There's a wonderful forthright capacity to make up extra language in Anglo-Saxon. The words are very clear and direct.